The stars shimmered like diamonds scattered across an endless void. But Captain Ilara Voss wasn't admiring the view. She leaned forward in her command chair aboard the starship Eclipse, her sharp green eyes scanning the holographic display before her. It was a map, a galactic map, that outlined every known human colony, trade route, and exploration zone. But something about it gnawed at her. Every time she looked at the edge of human space, where the glowing lines abruptly stopped, she felt a pang of unease. "Captain," came the calm voice of Commander Rin Calix, her first officer. He stood beside her, arms crossed over his chest. "We're approaching the border. You sure you want to do this?" Ilara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tapped a finger against the armrest of her chair, considering his question. The Kio restricted zone loomed ahead, marked by jagged red lines on the map. No one dared venture beyond those boundaries, not since ancient treaties had sealed off the region centuries ago. Ships that strayed too close vanished without a trace, their crews never heard from again. And yet, here they were, mere hours away from crossing into forbidden territory. "I don't have a choice," Ilara finally said, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "Something's not right out there, Rin, I can feel it." Calix sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Feeling isn't evidence, Captain. We've been ordered to stay clear for a reason. Whatever's beyond that line, it's dangerous." Before Ilara could respond, a soft chime echoed through the bridge. Dr. Cale Armitage, the ship's xenobiologist, approached them with a datapad in hand. His face was pale, his expression tense. "You need to see this," he said, holding up the device. On its screen was a grainy image of strange symbols etched into what appeared to be the side of an alien vessel. "What is that?" Ilara asked, leaning closer. "We picked it up while scanning the area near the border," Armitage explained. "It matches markings I've seen in some of the oldest human ruins back on Earth, symbols that predate even our earliest recorded history." Ilara frowned. "You think these belong to whoever built the restricted zone?" "It's possible," Armitage replied. "But if so, why would they leave traces of themselves so close to the edge? Unless—" He hesitated, glancing at Calix before continuing. "Unless they wanted us to find them," Calix groaned. "Great. Aliens playing games with us, just what we needed." Ignoring him, Ilara turned back to the main viewport. The stars outside seemed dimmer now, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. "Whatever's out there," she murmured, "it's worth finding out." Hours later, the tension aboard the Eclipse had reached a fever pitch. The crew moved quietly between stations, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of consoles. Even Zira, the ship's AI, seemed subdued. Normally cheerful and eager to assist, the AI had grown unusually quiet since entering the vicinity of the restricted zone. Its avatar, a floating orb of light, hovered silently near the ceiling, casting faint shadows across the walls. "Zira," Ilara called, breaking the silence. "Anything new on the sensors?" The orb pulsed once before responding. "Scans indicate increased gravitational anomalies within the designated coordinates," Zira said in a tone devoid of emotion. "Additionally, communications systems are experiencing intermittent interference. Cause unknown." Ilara exchanged a glance with Calix. "Interference, could it be natural phenomena?" "Unlikely," Zira replied. "Patterns suggest deliberate manipulation. Analysis incomplete." "Deliberate?" Calix muttered under his breath. "This just keeps getting better." As the ship drew closer to the boundary, the anomalies grew worse. Lights flickered across the bridge and the hum of the engines faltered intermittently. Then, without warning, a loud crackle filled the air. The crew froze as the sound resolved into a single, distorted word. "Remember." "What the hell was that?" Calix demanded, spinning around to face the comm station. "It's coming from somewhere outside the ship," Armitage said, his voice trembling. "A distress signal. Someone, or something, is trying to reach us." Ilara's heart raced. She gripped the edge of her chair, her mind racing. "A distress call from beyond the restricted zone?" It couldn't be a coincidence. Whoever or whatever was sending it must know they were here. "Track it," she ordered. "I want to know exactly where it's coming from." Moments later, the navigation console lit up with a blinking red dot. The signal originated from deep within the forbidden zone, far beyond the point where any sane person would dare to go. "Well?" Calix asked, raising an eyebrow. "What's it going to be, Captain? Stick to protocol or chase ghosts?" Ilara stared at the blinking dot for a long moment. Protocol dictated that she turn the ship around and report the incident to the Interstellar Council. But something inside her, a mix of curiosity, determination, and perhaps even defiance, refused to let her walk away. "We're going after it," she said firmly. "Set a course for the source of the signal." Calix opened his mouth to protest but thought better of it. Instead, he simply shook his head and returned to his station. "Your funeral," he muttered. The journey deeper into the restricted zone was anything but smooth. As they passed the invisible threshold, the ship's systems began behaving erratically. Time seemed to stretch and compress unpredictably, and the stars outside the viewport flickered like dying candles. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the eclipse operational, but fear lingered in the air. Finally, after what felt like hours or maybe days, they arrived at the source of the signal. What they found took their breath away. Drifting silently in the void was an alien vessel unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the same word they'd heard earlier. "Remember." "Scan it," Ilara ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. Armitage complied, his fingers flying over the controls. "It's incredible. This design predates anything in our database. These materials, they shouldn't exist. And the symbols," Ilara prompted. "They match the ones we saw earlier," Armitage confirmed. "But there's more. There's writing inside. It's fragmented, but it mentions something called the Architects." "The Architects?" Calix repeated skeptically. "Sounds like the name of a bad holovid." "Maybe," Ilara said, her eyes narrowing. "Or maybe it's the key to understanding why no one dares to cross this line." With a deep breath, she made her decision. "Prepare a boarding party. We're going in." Inside the alien ship, the air was cold and heavy, as though the very atmosphere carried the weight of untold secrets. The walls were lined with glowing runes, and strange artifacts floated in. Stasis fields. In the center of the main chamber stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystalline object radiating faint energy. "This is it," Armitage whispered, stepping forward. "Whatever this is, it holds the answers." As he reached for the crystal, Zira's voice crackled through their comms. "Warning, unknown entities detected. Advise immediate retreat." But it was too late. The moment Armitage touched the crystal, the room erupted in light, and the truth began to unfold. The moment Dr. Cale Armitage's fingers brushed against the crystalline object, the alien ship shuddered violently. The glowing runes along the walls flared brighter, bathing the chamber in an eerie blue light. A low hum filled the air, resonating, deep within the bones of everyone present. Ilara instinctively raised her hand to shield her eyes as the pedestal beneath the crystal began to pulse with energy. "Armitage," she barked, stepping forward. "What did you do?" "I didn't," he stammered, backing away from the pedestal. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "It wasn't supposed to." Before he could finish, the crystal shot a beam of light straight upward, piercing through the ceiling as though it were made of glass. The beam expanded outward, forming a swirling vortex that crackled with electricity. The crew froze, staring at the phenomenon in equal parts awe and terror. "Everyone back to the eclipse," Ilara shouted, gripping her sidearm tightly. "Now!" But before they could move, a voice echoed through the chamber, not from their comms, but seemingly from everywhere at once. It spoke in a language none of them understood, yet somehow they grasped its meaning. "You have awakened the veil." "What does that mean?" Calix demanded, glancing around nervously. "Who's talking?" No one answered. Instead, the vortex above them pulsed again. and the alien ship began to shake even more violently. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing hidden compartments filled with strange devices that emitted soft, rhythmic beeps. The temperature dropped, sharply, and frost began to form on the metallic surfaces. "We need to leave," Armitage insisted, his voice rising in panic. "This isn't safe." Ilara hesitated for a split second, her instincts warring with her curiosity. Finally, she nodded. "Move out, back to the airlock." By the time they reached the eclipse, the alien vessel had vanished entirely. One moment it was there, drifting silently in the void. The next, it was gone, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in the fabric of space. The crew stumbled onto the bridge, breathless and shaken as Zira hovered near the main console. "Report," Ilara commanded, dropping into her command chair. "Sensors indicate residual energy signatures consistent with spatial displacement," Zira replied. Its orb flickered slightly, a sign of stress or confusion. "The alien vessel has exited conventional spacetime." "Great," Calix muttered, collapsing into his seat. "So we just pissed off something powerful enough to teleport an entire ship." "Fantastic." Ilara ignored him, her gaze fixed on the viewport. Beyond the window, the stars seemed dimmer now, their light distorted by an invisible force. She tapped her comm unit. "Engineering status report. All systems functional, Captain," came the reply from Chief Engineer Tessa Novak. "But we're picking up some weird readings. Gravitational fluctuations are increasing exponentially." "Gravitational fluctuations?" Ilara repeated, frowning. "From what source?" "Unknown. But whatever it is, it's pulling us deeper into the restricted zone." Ilara exchanged a worried glance with Calix. "Engines to full power. Try to break free." "Aye, Captain," Novak responded. Moments later, the hum of the engines grew louder as the ship strained against the unseen force dragging them onward. Despite their best efforts, the eclipse continued moving inexorably deeper into the forbidden region. As they traveled, the anomalies grew worse. Time itself seemed to distort, the chronometers aboard the ship fluctuating wildly, sometimes skipping ahead minutes, other times crawling by painfully slowly. The crew struggled to maintain focus, their sense of reality slipping further and further away. Then they began finding debris. At first it was small, a fragment of hull here, a piece of machinery there. But soon, entire ships appeared, drifting, lifelessly in the void. Some were human vessels, their designs unmistakable despite years of decay. Others belonged to species no one recognized, their forms twisted and alien. Each wreck bore the same markings, symbols identical to those found on the alien ship. "These ships, they're all old," Armitage said, examining scans from the science station. "Centuries old, maybe more. They've been here for a long time." "But why?" Ilara asked, her brow furrowed. "Why would anyone leave these ships here? And why hasn't anyone ever retrieved them?" "Because no one comes back," Zira interjected unexpectedly. Its orb pulsed rapidly, almost nervously. "Records indicate that all expeditions beyond this point end in failure. Crews vanish, ships are lost, data corrupted. And yet we're still here," Calix said dryly. "Lucky us." Ilara ignored him again, standing up to pace across the bridge. "There has to be a reason. Something forcing these ships to stay, or something keeping them trapped." As if in response, the sensors picked up another signal. This one was stronger, clearer than the previous distress call. It led them to a massive derelict floating amidst the wreckage, a colossal alien craft shaped like a jagged crescent moon. Unlike the smaller ships, this one showed no signs of damage. Its surface gleamed faintly, as though it had been waiting patiently for visitors. "That thing looks intact," Calix observed, leaning closer to the display. "Almost too intact." "Could it be another trap?" Armitage wondered aloud. "Maybe," Ilara admitted. "But it's our only lead right now. Prep a boarding party." Inside the derelict, the atmosphere was oppressive. The corridors were vast and labyrinthine, lined with walls that seemed to shift when no one was looking. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the floors and ceilings, pulsing in sync with the ship's internal systems. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the structure itself was alive and listening. "This place gives me the creeps," Calix muttered, holding his rifle tightly. He glanced over his shoulder constantly, half expecting something to leap out at them. "You're not alone," Armitage whispered, clutching a scanner in one hand. His knuckles were white, his face etched with tension. "These readings, they don't make sense. It's like the laws of physics are bending around us." They eventually reached a central chamber, larger than any room they'd encountered so far. At its center stood a holographic projection, a map of the galaxy, but unlike anything they'd ever seen. Entire regions were marked with colors and patterns unfamiliar to human cartography. Most striking of all, however, was the section labeled Human Space. It was surrounded by a thick red boundary, clearly delineating the restricted zone. And then the projection changed. The map zoomed in on Earth, highlighting key moments in human history. Ancient civilizations rose and fell. Wars raged. Empires crumbled. Then abruptly the timeline shifted to the modern era, showing humanity's rapid expansion into the stars. But interspersed among these events were images of destruction, planets burning, ecosystems collapsing, species vanishing. Finally, the projection stopped on a single phrase written in bold letters: "Your expansion destroys." Silence fell over the group. No one spoke for several long seconds, so Calix finally broke the silence, his voice unusually quiet. "Are we saying humans screwed up the galaxy?" "It's not just us," Armitage corrected grimly. "Look at the rest of the map. Other species have done the same, maybe worse." "But why seal us off?" Alara asked, her voice barely audible. "If this was meant to protect the galaxy, why let us keep expanding within the boundaries?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber shook violently. The hologram flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. When the lights returned, the walls around them began shifting again, but this time they weren't empty. Figures emerged from the shadows, translucent and humanoid, their faces obscured by flowing hoods. "The architects," Zira's voice whispered, through their comms. "They are here." The figures raised their arms in unison, and a wave of energy surged through the chamber. The last thing Alara saw before blacking out was the word etched into the floor beneath her feet: "Remember." When Alara regained consciousness, she found herself lying on the cold metallic floor of the alien chamber. Her head throbbed, and her vision swam as she blinked against the dim light. Slowly, she pushed herself upright, taking stock of her surroundings. The rest of the boarding party was scattered around her. Calix groaned as he sat up, rubbing his temples, while Armitage clutched his scanner like a lifeline. Zira's orb flickered weakly nearby, its usual glow diminished. "What happened?" Calix muttered, shaking his head to clear it. "The architects," Alara replied grimly, her voice low but steady. She glanced at the walls, which now pulsed faintly with an inner light. The ghostly figures were gone, but their presence lingered, in the air, heavy and oppressive. "They're trying to tell us something." Armitage stood shakily, his eyes darting between the glowing symbols etched into the walls. "This place isn't just a ship," he said, his tone hushed. "It's a message, a warning." "A warning about what?" Calix snapped, his frustration bubbling over. "We already saw the map. Humans messed up. Other species messed up. Big deal. Why go through all this trouble just to show us how bad we are?" "It's not about blame," Alara interjected firmly. "It's about consequences. Whatever these architects are, they've been watching us for a long time. And they've decided that humanity can't be trusted outside our borders." "But why now?" Armitage asked, his brow furrowing. "Why reveal themselves after centuries of silence? What changed?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber began to hum again. The walls shifted once more, rearranging themselves into a new configuration. A massive screen materialized before them, displaying a series of images that seemed to flow seamlessly together like a film. The crew watched in stunned silence as the story unfolded. The first image showed the galaxy in its infancy, a swirling mass of stars and dust, untouched by intelligent life. Then came the architects, appearing as towering, ethereal beings whose forms shimmered like liquid light. They moved gracefully among the nascent worlds, shaping planets and ecosystems with effortless precision. It was clear they viewed themselves as stewards of creation, guardians of balance. Over millennia, other civilizations emerged. Some thrived peacefully, coexisting with the natural order. Others expanded recklessly, consuming resources without regard for the consequences. These latter groups inevitably collapsed under their own weight, leaving behind barren wastelands where vibrant worlds once flourished. Then came humanity. At first, humans appeared insignificant, an isolated species confined to a single planet. But as technology advanced, they began reaching outward, spreading across the stars faster than any civilization before them. The screen showed cities rising on distant moons, mines carving scars into pristine landscapes, and battles erupting over contested territories. Entire ecosystems crumbled beneath the relentless march of progress. Finally, the screen displayed Earth itself, a pale blue dot surrounded by a web of red lines. These lines represented humanity's expansion, each one cutting deeper into the galaxy's delicate fabric. The message was clear. Humans had become a force of destruction, destabilizing entire regions of space. The final image was the most chilling. It depicted the architects erecting the Veil, a shimmering barrier that sealed off human space from the rest of the galaxy. The accompanying text read, "To protect the balance, you must remain contained." When the screen faded, the chamber fell, silent. No one spoke for several moments, each person processing what they had seen. "So that's it then," Calix said eventually, his voice hollow. "We're prisoners, locked away because we can't be trusted." "It's not that simple," Alara countered, though her expression betrayed her uncertainty. "The architects didn't act out of malice. They were protecting the galaxy, us included. But at what cost?" Armitage argued, his voice rising. "How many generations have lived and died believing the restricted zone was some kind of divine law? How many discoveries have we missed because we were too afraid to look beyond? And how many lives would have been lost if we hadn't stayed within the boundaries?" Ilara shot back. "You saw what happens when civilizations expand unchecked. Look at those ruins we passed. Those ships, their warnings, Kale, monuments to failure." Armitage opened his mouth to respond, but Zira interrupted before he could speak. "Captain," the AI said urgently, its orb pulsing rapidly, "I am detecting increased activity near the Veil. Gravitational distortions suggest it is destabilizing." "What does that mean?" Calix demanded, turning sharply toward the orb. "It means we may have triggered something," Armitage answered grimly. "Crossing the threshold, activating the map, the architects might see this as a violation of their agreement." Alara's stomach churned. "Can we stabilize it?" "I don't know," Armitage admitted. "But if we don't figure it out soon, the Veil could collapse, and take everything with it." As they debated, the chamber began to change again. This time, the walls dissolved entirely, leaving them standing in what felt like open space. Around them stretched a vast expanse filled with swirling colors and shifting patterns. It was beautiful yet disorienting, like staring into the heart of a kaleidoscope. From the chaos emerged a single figure, an architect, larger and more radiant than the others they'd seen. Its form shifted constantly, never settling into a fixed shape. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in their minds, bypassing language entirely. "You have trespassed upon sacred ground," it intoned, its words carrying both authority and sorrow. "Your curiosity has brought you here, but your actions threaten the balance we have worked to preserve." "We didn't mean to cause harm," Alara exclaimed, stepping forward despite her fear. "We only wanted answers, to understand why we're trapped." The architect paused, tilting its head as though considering her words. "Understanding requires responsibility," it replied. Yet your kind has shown little respect for the responsibilities bestowed upon you. You consume. You destroy. You forget. That's not fair, Armitage protested, his voice trembling with emotion. Humans aren't perfect, but we're capable of learning, of growing. Give us a chance to prove ourselves. The architect regarded him silently for a moment. Then it extended a shimmering tendril toward Zira's orb. The AI flared brightly, emitting a high-pitched whine as data streamed between them. There is truth in your words, the architect said finally. But trust must be earned. For now, you will return to your space. Reflect on what you have learned. If you wish to earn our trust, you must demonstrate change not through words but through action. With that, the vision dissolved, and the crew found themselves back aboard the Eclipse. The derelict ship was gone, replaced by empty void. Yet, the memory of the architect's words lingered, weighing heavily on their hearts. The Eclipse drifted silently through the void, its engines humming faintly as it carried the crew further into the restricted zone. Though they had escaped the derelict ship in the architect's presence, the weight of what they had learned pressed heavily on everyone. Tension filled the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. On the bridge, Alara stood at the viewport, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her gaze was fixed on the swirling colors ahead, the veil itself, now visible as a shimmering curtain of energy that stretched across the stars. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, radiating an aura of both beauty and menace. Zira hovered nearby, its orb flickering erratically, as though struggling to process everything it had absorbed during its encounter with the architect. We're getting closer, Calix announced from his station, breaking the silence. His voice was clipped, betraying his unease. Gravitational distortions are increasing. If we don't stabilize soon, this whole area could collapse. Ilara turned sharply, her green eyes narrowing. Stabilize? How do you propose we do that? Commander? I'm not saying I have all the answers, Calix shot back, his frustration bubbling over, but sitting here staring at it isn't going to help either. Enough, Ilara snapped, silencing him with a glare. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Losing control wouldn't solve anything. Turning to Armitage, who sat hunched over the science console, she asked, Doctor, any insights? Armitage didn't respond immediately. He was pale, sweat beading on his forehead as he analyzed streams of data pouring in from the sensors. Finally, he looked up, his expression grim. The veil isn't just a barrier, it's a construct. A living system designed to maintain balance by containing chaos. Every time someone crosses into the restricted zone, it destabilizes. That's why ships vanish. The veil absorbs them. Absorbs them? Ilara repeated, her stomach sinking. You mean it destroys them? No, Armitage corrected, shaking his head. Not destroy. Integrate. It takes their energy, their essence, and uses it to sustain itself. Think of it as recycling, but on a cosmic scale. So what happens if it collapses entirely? Calix demanded. Then the entire galaxy pays the price, Armitage replied darkly. Without the veil, the imbalance caused by reckless civilizations, including ours, would spread unchecked. Planets would die. Stars would burn out. Entire systems would unravel. Ilara clenched her fists, her mind racing. They couldn't let that happen. But how could they stop it? The architects had made it clear. Humanity wasn't ready for freedom. Yet turning back felt like surrender and failure. What about Zira? She asked suddenly, glancing at the AI. It connected with the architect. Did it learn anything useful? Zira's orb pulsed weakly before responding. I possess fragments of knowledge, it said, its voice softer than usual. The veil requires alignment, a harmonization of energies to restore stability. However, such alignment demands a sacrifice. A sacrifice? Calix echoed, raising an eyebrow. What kind of sacrifice? One that transcends individuality, Zira continued cryptically. To mend the veil, one must become part of it. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Everyone knew what Zira meant, or rather, who it meant. The AI itself was the most logical candidate. Its consciousness could merge with the veil, stabilizing it, and potentially bridging communication between the architects and humanity. "You can't seriously be considering this," Calix said, turning to Alara. "Zira is part of the crew. You can't just throw it away." "It's not about throwing anything away," Alara countered sharply. "If Zira merging with the veil saves billions of lives, then it's worth it. But it's not your decision to make," Calix argued. "This isn't some noble self-sacrifice movie. We're talking about dismantling a sentient being." Before Alara could respond, Zira interrupted. "Commander Captain, I am capable of making my own choices. While I value my existence, I understand the stakes. If my integration prevents catastrophe, then it is my duty to comply." Calix opened his mouth to protest again, but no words came out. Instead, he slumped back in his seat, defeated. Even Armitage looked away, unable to meet Zira's glowing orb. As the eclipse approached the veil, the crew prepared for the inevitable. Engineering rerouted power to shield generators, ensuring the ship could withstand the surge of energy when Zira initiated the merge. Meanwhile, Alara called a brief meeting in the mess hall to address the team. "This mission has been dangerous from the start," she began, her tone firm but compassionate. "We've faced challenges none of us could have anticipated. But now we stand at a crossroads. Zira has volunteered to save us and possibly the entire galaxy. It's a choice none of us wanted to face, but it's the only option we have." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I won't lie to you. This is going to hurt. Saying goodbye to a member of our family never gets easier. But we owe it to Zira and to ourselves to see this through. Together." The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the ship's systems. One by one, the crew nodded, their faces etched with determination and sorrow. Hours later, the eclipse positioned itself near the edge of the veil. On the bridge, the atmosphere was somber. Zira's orb floated serenely above the central console, its light steady despite the gravity of the moment. "Are you sure about this?" Alara asked softly, her voice barely audible. "I am," Zira replied. "Thank you for trusting me, Captain, and thank you for allowing me to serve." Tears welled in Alara's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. She gave a sharp nod to the helm officer. "Initiate sequence." The ship shuddered slightly as the veil reacted to their proximity. Streams of energy lashed out, crackling against the shields. Within moments, the entire vessel vibrated violently, threatening to tear apart. Zira's orb pulsed once more, brighter than ever before. "Activating merge protocol," it announced. With that, it launched itself toward the viewport, phasing through the reinforced glass and disappearing into the radiant expanse beyond. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the veil erupted in a dazzling display of light and color. Waves of energy surged out, pushing over the eclipse like a tidal wave, themselves holding onto their stations as sparked, and then, just as suddenly as it began, the chaos subsided. The veil stabilized, its pulsing glow returning to a gentle rhythm. Outside the viewport, the stars reappeared, shining brightly once more. Back on the bridge, the crew sat in stunned silence. Alara stared at the spot where Zira had vanished, her heart heavy with loss. The AI had given everything to save them, and perhaps the galaxy. "Well," Calix said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "That's one hell of a legacy." Alara nodded slowly, composing herself. "Yes, it is. Let's make sure it wasn't in vain." As the eclipse turned back toward human space, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. Not just in the galaxy, but within themselves. The veil still stood, but now it carried a piece of Zira's essence, a reminder that even in sacrifice, there is hope. The journey back to human space was somber, the weight of Zira's sacrifice hanging over the crew like a shadow. The eclipse moved silently through the stars, its engines humming softly as if mourning alongside them. On the bridge, Captain Alara, Voss sat in her command chair, staring at the now stable veil through the viewport. It shimmered faintly in the distance, a reminder of what they had lost and what they had gained. Zira was gone, but its presence lingered. Fragments of its consciousness remained embedded in the ship's systems, occasionally flickering to life in unexpected ways. A console would light up for no apparent reason, or a voice resembling Zira's would whisper through the comms, soft, fleeting echoes of the AI that had given everything to save them. For Alara, these moments were both comforting and painful, a bittersweet reminder of their fallen companion. As they neared the edge of the restricted zone, the crew gathered on the bridge to discuss their next steps. The Interstellar Council would demand answers, and Alara knew she couldn't simply hand over a report. What they had uncovered wasn't just information, it was a responsibility. Humanity's future depended on how they chose to act. So, what do we tell them? Commander Rin Calix asked, breaking the silence. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, his usual skepticism tempered by exhaustion. That we found some ancient alien gods who decided to lock us in a cosmic playpen? That Zira sacrificed itself to keep the galaxy from falling apart? Alara turned to face him, her expression resolute. We tell them the truth, all of it. The architects, the veil, the damage humanity has caused, we lay it all out. No sugarcoating, no excuses. And then what? Dr. Cale Armitage chimed in, his voice weary but determined. Do we just sit back and hope they listen? Hope they change? No, Alara replied firmly. We don't wait for permission. If the council won't act, we will. We've seen what's possible when people work together. Not just humans, but everyone. The galaxy isn't ours to take, it's ours to protect. And if we want to earn the trust of the architects, or whatever else is out there, we need to start proving we're capable of doing better. Calix let out a dry laugh. You make it sound so easy. It's not going to be easy, Alara admitted. But it's necessary. Zira didn't give itself up so we could go back to business as usual. It gave us a chance, a second chance, to get things right. When the Eclipse finally re-entered human space, they were met with immediate attention. News of their unauthorized expedition had spread quickly, and the Interstellar Council wasted no time summoning Alara and her crew for questioning. The hearing was tense, with council members firing accusations and demands for explanations. But Alara stood her ground, delivering a speech that left the chamber in stunned silence. We've been living under a lie, she began, her voice steady despite the sea of skeptical faces before her. For centuries, we believed the restricted zone was imposed on us without reason, but the truth is far more complex and far more damning. The architects didn't seal us away because they hated us. They did it because they feared what we might do if left unchecked, and rightly so. She went on to describe everything they had discovered, the history of reckless expansion, the collapse of ecosystems, the scars humanity had left on the galaxy. She spoke of the veil, the architects, and Zira's ultimate sacrifice. By the time she finished, even the most hardened council members looked shaken. What you're saying, one counselor began hesitantly, is that we've been given a second chance, that we have an opportunity to prove ourselves worthy of trust. Yes, Alara confirmed, but it's not just about earning trust, it's about survival. If we continue down the same path, we'll destroy ourselves, and possibly the galaxy along with us. The choice is ours, adapt or perish. After hours of deliberation, the council reached a decision. While they couldn't lift the restrictions, outright they agreed to implement sweeping reforms aimed at sustainable development, interstellar cooperation, and accountability. Colonies would be required to adhere to strict environmental regulations, and trade routes would prioritize mutual benefit over exploitation. Most importantly, a new division, the Galactic Stewardship Initiative, was established to oversee humanity's interactions with the wider universe. Months later, the changes began to take shape. Ships equipped with advanced terraforming technology were dispatched to repair damaged worlds, while diplomats worked tirelessly to forge alliances with neighboring species. For the first time in centuries, humanity started looking outward not as conquerors, but as partners. Alara and her crew became symbols of this new era. The Eclipse was retrofitted with experimental tech designed to monitor and maintain ecological balance, and its mission shifted from exploration to restoration. Though the loss of Zira still weighed heavily on them, they took solace in knowing that its sacrifice had sparked meaningful change. One evening, as the Eclipse drifted near the edge of human space, Ilara stood alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before her, their light twinkling like promises waiting to be fulfilled. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in what felt like forever. "Captain," came a familiar voice, behind her. She turned sharply, her heart skipping a beat. It was Zira, or at least something resembling Zira. Its orb hovered gently, its glow softer than before, yet unmistakably present. "Zira?" she whispered, stepping closer. "How?" "I am not whole," the AI replied, its voice tinged with warmth. "But I remain. A fragment of me resides within the veil, maintaining harmony. Another part lingers here aboard the Eclipse. My purpose continues." Tears welled in Ilara's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Zira pulsed once, almost affectionately. "The journey is far from over, Captain. Together, we will build a brighter horizon." As the AI floated away, leaving Ilara alone once more, she returned to the viewport. The stars gleamed brightly, their light unobscured by fear or ignorance. For the first time, the galaxy felt vast, not because of its dangers, but because of its possibilities. Humanity had been given a second chance, a fragile, precious gift. Whether they would rise to meet the challenge remained to be seen. But as long as there were those willing to remember, to learn, and to grow, the future held infinite potential. And somewhere beyond the veil, the architects watched, waiting to see if their gamble had paid off.